Listen to me carefully, because this message is not for everyone. If you have felt something shifting in your spirit, if you've sensed God speaking to you in quiet moments, if you've been carrying something sacred inside your heart that you cannot fully explain to anyone, this is for you. God says, keep this between us. Not because it's small, but because it's holy. Some things are not meant to be announced. Some blessings are not meant to be explained. Some assignments are not meant to be discussed. Stay with me. Because by the end of this message, you will understand why God told you not to tell anyone. There are moments in life when God speaks softly, not through noise, not through crowds, but through stillness. You may be going through a season where you feel separated, not lonely, but set apart. People don't understand you anymore. Your excitement feels quiet. Your plans feel hidden. Your prayers feel personal. And you wonder, God, why can't I talk about this? Why do I feel restrained? Why do I feel protected but also isolated? Let me tell you something powerful. In Scripture, God often revealed things privately. Before he revealed them publicly, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it too early, it attracted jealousy instead of support. Mary carried Jesus, but pondered these things in her heart. Jesus himself told people, don't tell anyone what you've seen yet. Timing matters. Silence matters. Protection matters. You are not being hidden because you are weak. You are being hidden because you are becoming. Some revelations are too precious for noise. Hear me. Not everyone deserves access to what God whispered to you. When God speaks to you in secret, it's because the message is fragile in its early stages, like a seed in the ground. If you dig it up every day to show people, it will never grow. Some people don't listen with faith. They listen with doubt, with comparison, with jealousy, and doubt can kill a miracle. Before it ever breathes, that's why God says, keep this between us, not because he doesn't trust others, but because he trusts you. You don't need applause. For what God is doing in private, you need obedience. Breathe. This silence is not punishment. It is preparation. Every divine assignment has a vulnerable stage. Before David wore the crown, he learned to fight lions in private. Before Moses spoke to Pharaoh, he learned to hear God in the wilderness. Before your breakthrough shows up publicly, God trains you privately. And training requires focus. When you talk too much, you invite opinions. When you invite opinions, you invite confusion, and confusion weakens faith. God says, let me finish this work in you before others comment on it. You don't owe anyone an explanation. For obedience, what God is building in you does not need validation. It needs incubation. Immature faith shouts everything. Mature faith knows when to be quiet. There is a difference between secrecy and wisdom. Secrecy hides sin. Wisdom protects purpose. You are learning restraint. You are learning discernment. You are learning to move. Only when God says move, and this discipline is shaping you. Not everyone can handle success quietly. Not everyone can hold revelation without leaking it. But God saw something in you. That's why he trusted you with something unspoken. You don't have to post it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to defend it. God sees. God knows. God remembers. Let me speak prophetically now. The enemy doesn't attack what he doesn't know. Some of the battles you avoided were because you stayed silent. Some of the delays you escaped were because you didn't explain yourself. When Nehemiah rebuilt the wall, he didn't tell everyone his plan. When Jesus prepared for the cross, he prayed alone. Not everything is warfare, but everything valuable is watched. Silence confuses the enemy. While they are guessing, God is moving. While they doubt, God is aligning. While they question, God is accelerating. Keep this between us until I say otherwise. Now listen carefully. God is not saying never. He is saying not yet. There will be a moment when God himself will reveal what you tried so hard to explain, and when he does, no one will be able to stop it. What is born in silence will speak loudly in destiny. When the timing is right, your life will answer every question people had. You won't need to convince, you won't need to argue, you won't need to prove. God will do it openly. But for now, walk quietly, pray deeply, trust fully. Let me remind you, you are not behind, you are not forgotten, you are not confused, you are being covered. This season of silence is building strength in you. You are learning to hear God above every other voice. You are learning patience. You are learning faith. You are learning obedience. And these lessons will sustain you. When the blessing comes, what God told you will come to pass. What God promised you will unfold. What God planted in you will grow, just not in public. Yet, take a moment now. Close your eyes. Breathe. Ask yourself, what has God told me to keep quiet? Not because it's shameful, but because it's sacred. Pray this quietly in your heart. God, I trust your timing. I trust your process. I trust your silence. If this message spoke to your spirit, don't explain it. Respond to it. Type, I will trust God in silence. In the comments, share this with someone who needs confirmation, not conversation. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Cho Motivation for messages that strengthen your faith and sharpen your spirit. Remember, what God is doing in secret will be revealed in power. Until then, keep this between you and God. There are moments when God speaks something to you that feels deeply personal, almost too delicate to put into words. It is not because the message is unclear, but because it is sacred. Not every revelation God gives is meant to be shared immediately, and not every listener is meant to hear it. When God asks you to keep something between you and Him, it is an act of trust, not restriction. He is saying, I am placing this in your hands because I know you can carry it with reverence. Many people confuse silence with fear, but spiritual silence is often wisdom. When God reveals something in its early stage, it is like a seed freshly placed in the soil. At that point, the seed does not need sunlight or attention from others. It needs darkness, stillness, and protection. If you dig it up to show everyone what was planted, you interrupt the growth process. In the same way, when you rush to explain what God told you, you expose something that has not yet developed roots. God knows that premature exposure can damage what He is growing in you. Not everyone hears with faith. Some people listen with curiosity, some with doubt, and some with jealousy. Even well-meaning people can speak words that weaken your confidence. A simple comment like, are you sure? Or that sounds unrealistic, can lodge itself in your spirit and begin to erode what God clearly spoke. God understands human nature better than you do. He knows that not everyone will celebrate what He has promised you, especially when it challenges their understanding, expectations, or insecurities. That is why He sometimes says, this is just for us. In Scripture, we repeatedly see that divine revelation often comes before divine timing. Joseph had a God-given dream, but when he shared it too early, it brought betrayal instead of blessing. The dream was real, but the moment was wrong. The problem was not the revelation, it was the exposure. God was still shaping Joseph's character, wisdom, and endurance. The revelation needed time to mature inside him before it could manifest around him. This pattern is not unique to Joseph. It is a spiritual principle. When God tells you to stay quiet, He is also teaching you to rely on Him instead of validation. Silence forces you to stand on faith alone. You cannot lean on applause, agreement, or encouragement from others. You must trust that what God said is enough, even when no one else knows about it. This kind of faith is deep and unshakable. It does not rise and fall based on people's opinions. It grows strong in private where only God sees. There is also a protective aspect to silence. Some blessings attract resistance before they arrive. Some callings stir opposition simply because of their potential. By keeping the revelation private, God shields it from unnecessary spiritual and emotional interference. You are not hiding because you are ashamed. You are covering something precious. Just as a mother protects a child before birth, God protects His promises before manifestation. Silence also sharpens your spiritual hearing. When you are not busy explaining what God said, you become more attentive to what He is saying next. You learn patience. You learn obedience. You learn how to move only when He gives direction. This discipline prepares you for the weight of the blessing that is coming. If you cannot steward the revelation quietly, you may not yet be ready to steward the fulfillment publicly. Keeping a revelation between you and God is not about secrecy, it is about stewardship. God entrusts you with something holy and asks you to guard it until the right moment. And when that moment comes, you will not need to announce it. God Himself will reveal what He planted in silence. What was once whispered in private will speak loudly through your life. When God asks you to stay silent, it is often because He is actively protecting the process He has started in your life. Every divine work unfolds in stages, and the early stages are always the most sensitive. Just as a building requires scaffolding before it stands strong on its own, your calling, breakthrough, or transformation needs structure, time, and divine covering. God understands that unfinished things are vulnerable, and that is why He guards them through silence. Many people underestimate how powerful words can be. Words invite influence. When you speak too soon about what God is doing, you open the door to opinions, expectations, and interpretations that were never meant to shape your journey. Even advice that sounds wise can distract you from God's original instruction. God knows exactly what He is forming in you, and He does not want outside voices interfering with the precision of His work. Silence becomes a shield that keeps your focus clear and your faith intact, protection of the process. also means protection from comparison. When you talk about what God has promised you, people naturally compare your journey with theirs. Some will question your timing. Others will measure your progress. A few may even try to compete. This creates pressure that God never intended you to carry. God does not want you rushing, forcing, or adjusting His plan just to meet someone else's expectations. By keeping you quiet, He removes unnecessary pressure and allows you to grow at the pace grace has designed for you. There is also an emotional protection involved. When something is still forming, you may not yet have the strength to defend it. If people challenge what God told you, it can create inner conflict. You may start doubting yourself, replaying conversations, or seeking reassurance from the wrong places. God knows that doubt grows faster when a promise is still fragile. Silence protects your heart from emotional exhaustion and keeps your spirit anchored in trust rather than debate. In Scripture, God often led people into hidden seasons before public breakthroughs. Moses spent years in the wilderness before leading Israel. David lived as a shepherd long before becoming king. Jesus spent 30 years in obscurity before 3 years of ministry that changed the world. These hidden seasons were not delays, they were divine protection. God was shaping their character, deepening their dependence, and strengthening their obedience. Exposure too early would have damaged the mission. When God protects the process, He is also teaching you discipline. Learning to wait, to listen, and to move only when instructed is a spiritual skill. Silence trains you to follow God rather than your emotions. It teaches you that not every feeling needs expression, and not every thought needs an audience. This discipline will be essential when the blessing comes because greater visibility requires greater self-control. Another reason God protects the process through silence is spiritual opposition. Not every battle is visible, but every calling attracts resistance. The enemy does not need to understand the full picture. He only needs enough information to disrupt your peace. By keeping certain things hidden, God limits unnecessary attacks while you remain quiet. God is working behind the scenes, aligning people, opening doors, and closing wrong paths without distraction. Silence also allows God to surprise you. When you are not announcing your steps, you are more open to divine redirection. God can shift your path without embarrassment or explanation. You are free to obey without justifying changes to anyone. This flexibility keeps you sensitive to God's voice and responsive to His leading. God's protection is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it feels like waiting. Sometimes it sounds like a gentle instruction to stay quiet. But in that quiet, something powerful is happening. Roots are growing. Strength is building. Wisdom is forming. When the process is complete, what God reveals will stand firm because it was protected in silence. Before God ever elevates someone publicly, He almost always develops them privately. This is a spiritual pattern that runs throughout Scripture and through life itself. Public promotion may look sudden to others, but it is never sudden to God. Long before anyone sees the result, God is shaping the heart, the character, and the endurance of the person He plans to lift. When you find yourself in a quiet season, unseen and seemingly unnoticed, it does not mean nothing is happening. It means the most important work is taking place where only God can see it. Private development is where identity is formed. In public spaces, it is easy to become influenced by praise, criticism, or comparison. In private, there is no applause and no audience. You are left alone with your thoughts, your fears, and your faith. This is where God teaches you who you are without external validation. He wants you grounded in His voice before you are exposed to many others. If your confidence is built on people's approval, it will collapse under pressure. God builds confidence in secrecy so it can withstand visibility. God also uses private seasons to teach obedience. When no one is watching, obedience becomes pure. You are not serving for recognition or reward. You are serving because God asked you to. This kind of obedience refines your motives. It removes pride and replaces it with humility. Many people desire the platform, but few are willing to embrace the process that prepares them for it. God knows that public influence without private discipline leads to destruction. That is why He delays exposure until obedience becomes consistent. In these hidden seasons, God develops spiritual strength. Faith grows deeper when it is tested in silence. When prayers seem unanswered and progress feels slow, you learn to trust God beyond visible results. This kind of faith does not panic in uncertainty. It rests in God's character rather than circumstances. Private development teaches you patience, endurance, and perseverance. These qualities cannot be learned in comfort or popularity. They are formed in waiting. God also shapes wisdom in private. When you are not rushing to speak or prove yourself, you learn to listen. You become more sensitive to God's direction. You begin to recognize His timing and His tone. Wisdom grows when you observe, reflect, and learn quietly. This wisdom will later guide your decisions when your actions affect others. God will not place you in positions of influence until you have learned to discern in stillness. Many people misinterpret private seasons as rejection, but they are actually divine investment. God is investing time, attention, and care into you. Just as a craftsman works patiently on a masterpiece before displaying it, God works meticulously on your life. He addresses hidden weaknesses, heals unresolved wounds, and strengthens areas that would later be tested. Exposure without healing would only magnify pain. God heals in private so you can lead in wholeness. These seasons also teach you how to handle responsibility. Before David faced Goliath publicly, he fought lions and bears privately. No one applauded those battles, but they prepared him for the moment that would define his destiny. In the same way, the challenges you face now, unseen by others, are building confidence and courage for future assignments. What you overcome in secret becomes strength you carry in public. When the time of elevation comes, it will feel natural rather than overwhelming. You will not be surprised by responsibility because God already prepared you for it. Others may call it sudden, but you will know it was a long journey of quiet growth. Private development ensures that when God elevates you publicly, you are not just gifted enough to stand there, but strong enough to stay there. Spiritual maturity is revealed not by how much you speak, but by how well you discern when to speak and when to remain silent. In the early stages of faith, many people feel the need to explain everything God is doing in their lives. They share every idea, every feeling, every prayer. But as faith deepens, wisdom begins to guide expression. You learn that timing matters just as much as truth. Something can be right and still be spoken at the wrong moment. Waiting to speak is not weakness, it is strength under control. It takes discipline to hold back words when you feel excited, uncertain, or misunderstood. Mature faith understands that not every thought needs an audience, and not every revelation needs immediate confirmation. When God asks you to wait before speaking, He is teaching you restraint. This restraint protects your spirit from unnecessary conflict and keeps your focus aligned with His direction rather than with people's reactions. As maturity grows, you begin to recognize that words carry spiritual weight. What you say can shape your faith or undermine it. Speaking too soon can invite doubt into your own heart. Once a thought is spoken, it can return to you through others' opinions, sometimes distorted or discouraging. Mature believers learn to guard their words because they value the integrity of what God is doing within them. They understand that silence can be a form of faith. Maturity also brings discernment about people. Not everyone is meant to hear every part of your journey. Some people cannot celebrate what God is doing in you because it challenges their own season. Others may misunderstand and unintentionally discourage you. Wisdom helps you recognize who can handle certain conversations and who cannot. This is not about pride or secrecy, it is about stewardship. God entrusts you with revelation, and maturity determines how well you protect it. Knowing when to wait also deepens your dependence on God. When you cannot talk to others, you talk more to Him. Prayer becomes your outlet instead of explanation. Reflection replaces reaction. You learn to process emotions in God's presence rather than in public discussion. This deepens intimacy with Him and strengthens your spiritual foundation. Over time, you become more confident in His voice than in external affirmation. Spiritual maturity understands that God's timing is perfect even when it feels slow. Speaking prematurely often comes from impatience or the desire for reassurance. Waiting to speak reflects trust. It says, I believe God is working even if no one else sees it. This trust produces peace. You stop feeling pressured to justify your choices or defend your obedience. You become comfortable moving quietly, knowing that God is aware of every step. Mature faith also recognizes that silence is temporary, not permanent. There is a season to speak and a season to listen. Waiting does not mean suppressing truth forever. It means allowing truth to mature. When the right moment comes, your words will carry authority because they are backed by experience and fulfillment, not just hope. People listen differently when what you say is supported by what God has already done. Learning when to wait and when to speak shapes your character. It builds patience, humility, and wisdom. These qualities are essential for long-term spiritual growth. Without them, even genuine blessings can become burdens. God uses silence to refine you so that when you speak, your words align with His purpose rather than your emotions. In time, you will see that waiting was not about withholding your voice, but about strengthening it. When you finally speak, you will do so with clarity, confidence, and peace. That is the mark of spiritual maturity, knowing that obedience sometimes sounds like silence, and faith often grows strongest when words are carefully chosen. When something is revealed too early, it often becomes exposed to pressures it was never meant to face at that stage. In the spiritual realm, timing is not just important, it is protective. God understands that premature exposure can invite unnecessary attacks, distractions, and resistance. What He has planned for you carries weight, and anything with weight attracts attention. That is why God sometimes instructs you to stay quiet, not because the promise is weak, but because it is powerful. The enemy does not need full details to interfere. Even partial information can become a point of attack. When you announce what God is doing before it is established, you unintentionally highlight the target. Doubt, fear, jealousy, and opposition often follow. Some of this resistance comes through people, and some comes internally through discouragement and confusion. God knows that early exposure can open doors to battles you are not yet equipped to fight. Silence, in this sense, becomes a form of spiritual defense. Many people experience unnecessary delays, not because God changed His mind, but because pressure was introduced too soon. When others know your plans or promises, they may question your progress or expect results on their timeline. This creates stress and anxiety that can cloud your spiritual sensitivity. Instead of listening to God, you begin reacting to expectations. God never intended for your journey to be shaped by public opinion. By limiting exposure, He keeps you focused and free. In Scripture, wisdom often involved strategic silence. When Nehemiah was rebuilding the wall, he did not reveal his full plan to everyone. This was not deception, it was protection. Opposition was already present, and too much information would have strengthened the resistance. In the same way, God limits what you share so that opposition remains confused. Silence keeps the enemy guessing while God works behind the scenes. Another form of attack comes through comparison. When people know what you are pursuing, they compare their progress to yours or measure your journey against theirs. This comparison can stir envy, competition, or discouragement. Even if no one speaks negatively, the awareness itself can create tension. God removes this pressure by keeping certain things hidden. When you are not exposed, you are free to grow without constant evaluation. Early exposure can also invite self-sabotage. When you talk about something before it happens, you may feel pressure to perform or prove yourself. This can lead to rushed decisions, shortcuts, or moving ahead of God's timing. The enemy often uses impatience rather than opposition to derail people. Silence slows you down and keeps you dependent on God instead of on outcomes. There is also an emotional vulnerability in early stages. When something is still forming, criticism can feel heavier and doubt can feel louder. God protects your emotional health by limiting exposure. He knows when you are strong enough to handle resistance and when you need covering. Silence is not about isolation, it is about preservation. God's protection through silence also builds trust. When you see that staying quiet kept you from unnecessary battles, your faith in His wisdom grows. You begin to understand that not every challenge is meant to be faced head-on. Some are meant to be avoided through obedience. This kind of trust deepens your relationship with God and strengthens your discernment. When the right time comes, the attacks that once seemed intimidating will no longer have power over you. What was protected in silence will stand firm in public. God never withholds exposure to punish you. He withholds it to prepare you. By the time your purpose is revealed, you will be equipped, grounded, and confident. The early silence will make sense, and you will see that what could have been attacked was instead preserved by obedience and trust. When God allows something to be born in silence, it is never meant to remain hidden forever. Silence is not the destination, it is the beginning. What God starts quietly, He intends to reveal at the right time, in the right way, and with undeniable clarity. Many people misunderstand this season and assume that because nothing is visible, nothing is happening. In reality, the deepest and most powerful work often takes place where no one is watching. Silence gives purpose time to take shape. In the early stages, vision is fragile. It exists more as a promise than a reality. God knows that if it is exposed too soon, it may be misunderstood, doubted, or dismissed. So He allows it to grow in obscurity, where it can develop strength without pressure. Just as roots grow deep underground before a tree ever appears above the surface, destiny forms long before it is seen. When the roots are strong, what rises above ground cannot be easily shaken. What is formed in silence carries authenticity. When you have not relied on public affirmation, your confidence is not dependent on people's opinions. You know what God has done because you lived through the process with Him. This gives your testimony weight. When the time comes to speak, you are not repeating something you hope for. You are reflecting something you have experienced. People are drawn to that kind of authority because it is genuine and grounded. God's timing ensures that when something is revealed, it speaks louder than words ever could. Instead of explaining what God told you, your life begins to show it. Instead of defending your calling, the fruit becomes visible. This kind of revelation cannot be argued with. It silences doubt and answers questions without confrontation. What God reveals in this way carries peace rather than pressure. There's also a divine element of surprise in God's timing. When something emerges from silence, it often exceeds expectations. People who once overlooked you are suddenly aware of what God has done. This is not about proving anything, it is about glorifying God. When He reveals what He has been building, it becomes clear that the work was His, not yours. The silence protects the purity of His glory. Silence also prepares you emotionally for revelation. If exposure had come earlier, it might have overwhelmed you. Attention, responsibility, and expectation can be heavy. God uses hidden seasons to strengthen your inner life so that when visibility increases, you are not shaken by it. You are steady because your identity is already established in God, not in recognition. What is born in silence often carries greater impact because it was refined without distraction. There is clarity in something that has been developed quietly. You know why you are doing what you are doing. You understand the purpose behind it. This clarity allows you to move with confidence rather than confusion. When the time comes to act publicly, God never forgets what He starts. Silence is not abandonment. It is intentional preparation. While you wait, God is aligning circumstances, people, and opportunities that you cannot see. He is arranging moments that will bring everything into view at once. When the unveiling happens, it often feels sudden, but it is the result of careful and patient work. When destiny finally speaks, it does not need explanation. The season of silence gives way to a season of fulfillment. What once felt hidden becomes evident. What once felt quiet becomes impactful. And you realize that the silence was not wasted time, but sacred time. It was the space where God prepared something strong enough to stand, clear enough to be recognized, and powerful enough to fulfill its purpose. What God has been doing in your life was never meant to confuse you, delay you, or make you feel forgotten. Every season of silence, every instruction to wait, every moment where you felt restrained had a purpose. God was protecting what He placed inside you, shaping you in private, and preparing the right moment for revelation. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. What felt hidden was actually being strengthened. You now understand that silence is not absence, but alignment. God asked you to keep certain things between you and Him because they were sacred, not small. He was guarding the process, maturing your faith, and shielding you from battles you did not need to fight. In the quiet, He taught you trust. In the waiting, He built endurance. In the unseen moments, He formed character that will sustain the blessing when it arrives. When the time comes, you will not need to explain what God did. Your life will speak. The growth that happened underground will become visible, and the fruit will be undeniable. People may call it sudden, but you will know it was prepared through patience and obedience. What was born in silence will emerge with clarity and power, carrying God's signature all over it. So remain faithful, stay obedient, trust God's timing even when it feels slow. Keep listening, keep praying, and keep moving quietly when He asks you to. The silence will not last forever, but its impact will. What God started in secret, He will complete in the open, and when He does, you will see that every quiet step was leading you exactly where you were meant to be.